First question, does our government have legislation already in place that protects the power companies from this independent technology and generation of power we're offering?
The answer, oh, sorry, Ross.
No. I was going to say the legislation regarding the network management is very strict, and the lines companies have a responsibility to provide a level of power between certain profiles of electricity availability. So in that way, yes, there is a government legislation, but have recently joined or become aware of quite a few community network groups who are looking at creating these micro electricity generation and sharing communities, and they are receiving some support from some of the lines companies, which is generally exciting. But overall, New Zealand's quite a long way behind other countries, particularly the UK, where it's been community networks have been involved for many years. So we've got a long way to go in that area. John, if you would comment on that.
Yeah, well, my simple comment is no, they don't. But what Russell has alluded to is all the other legislation in the modus operandi that enables the network or for your car to drive on the road to function or so forth, you know. So has the government got any constraints with regards to AirPod? No. But are there restrictions with our AirPod being able to be used on the road? Yes. So it's not, there's anti-trade legislation that won't allow the government or anybody else to legislate against our entry. But there's also legislation that requires certain deliverables by power companies, et cetera, et cetera. So we've got to play the game. So the game is regulation. So we've got to know the regulation, be able to adapt to it. That's a very, very critical part of our rollout. Russell?
Thanks, John. Next question. This product is really good. Thank you. I invested in 1998 with the understanding that share listing would be around 2001. This never happened. My question for investors is, when will we see a return, being that as it's now been 26 years? Well, I could cover quite a lot of the history of the company. Certainly the initial main investment was with the mesh network technology, and from 2011 on, we solely focused on the MDI technology, and we've been in their shadow, so to speak, as far as commercialization, waiting for them to be ready to actually have a product ready for market. So yes, it's taken a long time. We acknowledge that. Certainly from an investor's point of view, we have been in for a long time. We are looking for exits, and that will be dependent on our market and what we're doing from here on in. So that's where really we're at a new stage, and we can start designing and planning for those types of that strategy around that more from here on in than we were able to right from the start. John,
yeah, I think you've got to. Yeah, I think if you're looking at a time frame like that, you've got to bear in mind that the internet technologies didn't work and was dismantled, and the management team left. So if you invested into internet technology, then you invested into something that didn't work. And the management team which you invested into then left. And the management team that then took over to try and bring shareholder returns, etc., formed the relationship with MDI. But whilst the concept, the understanding of MDI was very good, the actual stages and the detail of the technology was not altogether that good. So we didn't know how long it was going to take. Neither did MDI, neither did anybody else. And yes, it's taken a long time to develop that product. Now, for anybody to say that there's going to be a listing, it's going to be a listing in 2001 or whatever, is a bit of a pipe dream, because listing is not related to a time, it's related to an event So if you're going to list, you're going to list for a purpose. And there's two purposes. One is to create liquidity, the other is to raise money. So you want to do it at the ideal opportunity time. Now, that doesn't need to be when you've achieved everything, but it needs to be when you can identify what it is that you are going to achieve. So, for example, if you do a showcase and that showcase is globally replicable, you don't have to do you don't have to do the global replication to get the benefit from the showcase to be able to get the listing valuation. But you wouldn't value today. Now, from the point of view of creating liquidity, IPOing, initial public offerings and so forth is one, listing is one possibility. Another is trade money, right? To get a trade investor in can often create liquidity as well too for the shareholders. So this is something that we will look at in conjunction with investors who will then also be our shareholders quite quickly, like as in this year. Not look at doing it, but looking at the time frame for doing it. And if you said to me, well, when do you think that's likely to be? I would say, well, I'm certainly convinced that we will have an argument for liquidity within 3 years. Will it be within a year and a half? That's a bit tight. Because to get the maximum benefit and valuation for it, you want to be able to demonstrate the manufacture, the transport, and the energy, and the markets that are available. What about us as shareholder from a liquidity point of view? Well, what we'll try and do is to do sort of like off-market trade between parties to enable liquidity where that's desirable. And that's something, again, that we'll be looking at. Russell?
How do I obtain a recording of this webinar and PDF slides? Well, presuming that my recording has been successful, then we'll notify shareholders, and I've yet to find out, most probably there'll be a link that you can click on and download the recording, but you'll be notified how to obtain PDF and the recording.
The PDF, by the way, is about 1.5 megabyte. The Word document is 45 megabytes. So it'll be a PDF version.
Yeah. When do you anticipate an IPO and what do you anticipate the IPO price to be? I think, John, you've covered that in your previous answer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the timing I've covered in the previous question. The price I haven't covered in the previous question, but if you look around the world and you look at Tesla and you look at BDO and you look at other organizations, etc., whether they be in climate and energy or whether they be in AI, etc., or so forth, you're seeing huge valuations. Now, I'm not suggesting for one moment that you look at those as being a benchmark, because that'd be completely inappropriate. But what you can do is you can look at the principle. And the principle is this: have we got a product that the world needs and can use that's got a substantial market, and our differentiation is such that it will be acquired? Now, if you remember Bill Gates at the outset said, our mission statement is to have our product on every desktop. And he just about darn well achieved it, you know. Well, our mission statement is to create a relative competitiveness for most places where there are batteries, but not the very largest end, because that's really the underground caverns and so forth. And at this point, we've experimented with that, incidentally. MDI have experimented with that with major oil company. But at the moment, that's not on our radar screen. We're about the modular. So exact value, I don't know, because it's not going to be related to our current value, because our current value is next to nothing on the global scale of things. You know, if you've got a value of say 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 million, that's not material if you've got a significant company and a significant product. Now, don't for one moment go say something, oh, John said, you know, blah, 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 because what I'm not saying is not me. What I'm saying is look at the markets and draw your own conclusion. But we've got to prove it first of all. That's what we're doing at the moment, transitioning, and that's going to have a SWOT. That's going to have some opportunities, hurdles, etc., and we'll keep you posted on that. Jonathan?
I noticed I now have used our, but there are maybe half a dozen more questions. So if we allow another 5 minutes for questions, and we'll sort of see what we can race through. But
well, I'm in no hurry. I can go as long as the audience wants to go, subject to common sense. So it's in your hands, Russell. I'm available.
Well, I'm the same. There have been about 96 attendees. So if you can free to leave when you want, we're more than happy to answer questions.
Exactly.
What's the cost difference between batteries and an air wall? John, I'll leave that to you, because it's more to do with the kilowatts versus kilowatt hours and the mix and match of the air wall system, I would expect. Certainly.
Well, yes, absolutely it is. So the question is, not actually providing the information that's going to enable you to do the cost comparison. However, if you look at, it doesn't take much to Google what a Tesla, say a Tesla 7 kilowatt, 13.5 kilowatt hour battery cost. And there are deals and there's subsidies and this and that. So I'm not quite sure. You'd have to just do a quick Google, right? So if you then said, okay, well, what I want you to do is I want you to price a 7 kilowatt compressed air unit, air wall. Now the difference, because now I say, okay, it's a 7 kilowatt unit, but how many kilowatt hours do you want? Now, if you said, well, I want exactly 13.5 kilowatt hours, then we would design it in that fashion. If you said, I want 15 kilowatt hours, or if I want something different that we designed in that fashion, how do we do that? Because the kilowatt hours relate to duration and storage, and that's the tanks. The ability to generate the power sits with the engine. It's the difference between power is kilowatts, and the energy that's generated is the kilowatt hours. So you've got the power capacity. Just let me create a quick parallel. When we were talking about Western Australia, for example, the new battery they're putting in is 500 megawatt. Now, at 500 megawatts, got a 4-hour capacity, so it's 2,000 megawatt hours. Bang, that's fixed. That's it. You can't alter that, right? Now you can generate it slower, faster, but that's fixed. In our case, that's not the case. So in our case, if you've got a 7 kilowatt capacity, the kilowatt hours you want is what I call decoupled, are separate depending on the tanks. Now, unfortunately, if you said, okay, well, let me say to you that what's an air wall going to cost if it's 7 kilowatts and 13.5 kilowatt hours, I say, I can't tell you, because we're waiting right this very minute to see what the cost is going to be in Australasia of the engine components, which is the exercise that's happening with Shamrock. We don't have that information just yet.
I think in addition to that, John, the advantage of the engine, you may have a 7 kilowatt engine. You can run it, and if you have a variable speed generator associated with it, you can run the engine at slow revs and produce 1 kilowatt, or you could run it over and above. It's running it faster, and you could be generating 10 kilowatts. So you've got a lot of flexibility within the engine. And of course, then if you're wanting the 20 kilowatts, you can do the same. You can run it at a low revs. And the advantage of the MDI engine is it's quite capable to actually run at low revs, and also has a wide variation. So that provides enormous advantage. So whereas if you wanted to get 14 kilowatts from your and you've got battery storage, you have to spend another $7,000 or $8,000 to buy a new battery. With our technology, all you're having to do is run the engine faster, presuming then that you've got a constrained time where you've got an increased demand if you're in the house. So for 2 hours, you might run the engine faster. Who are your main competitors? Well, I think we've covered that. We're in the energy supply business, and we believe we have a competitive advantage. The market is actually, all our competitors are our market. So we're looking at anyone who's providing energy storage up to a point where John's written a very interesting paper which is available on our website, covering that very question on the energy side, showing the breadth of our market. John, have you anything to add on that?
Yeah, no, it's very. You got to bear in mind that we are part of a system. You know, we don't just sell a storage unit. We sell a storage unit that has a particular application requirement. And that application requirement somewhere along the way is going to have some electricity generation. Now that electricity generation, whether it be from wind or solar or off the grid or so forth, has organizations that are not our competitors. Our competitors are the storage unit. The only real storage units at the moment that make any sense from the point of view of their the prevalence are batteries. So batteries are our competitors if we look at it in competitive mode. If we don't look at it in competitive mode, then they're collaborators. So there are some cases where we would collaborate with batteries because we could provide something batteries don't, for example, long duration aggregated storage. And they can provide something that we don't, for example, fast response times if you're connecting to the grid. So generally speaking, you know, you've got the Teslas and the Sonans and the LGs and all these other different organizations that provide batteries. And that will depend to a large extent on the distributor that is, that's your advisor that's putting in the network. Now that might be an energy retailer like an AGL or a Genesis or an Origin Energy, or it might be an independent such as Repost or somebody like that. But they're our competitors. Anybody who provides storage to the same markets that we provide storage to, Russell.
Are we collaborating with other regions such as Asia, Europe, US, where MDI technology is being implemented? Well, the question there is that MDI technology is not being implemented, and we're very much a party to work with MDI to bridge that gap. We do receive quite a lot of questions about, can you provide a product for a particular market, and that can be regional. We've had inquiry from countries like in Ghana, certainly in the Pacific Islands, in South Africa, throughout Asia, and we do receive regular inquiry. But that is part of our output from this first project that we'll be doing following the manufacture, where we'll be looking at a compressed air energy storage, and shortly after the golf cart manufacture. But once we've got product, then we can start to really start to multiply or replicate what we're doing in other countries. And that's very much a critical part of our whole business model, is this replication and expanding into opportunities. Before you answer it, John, the next question relates to this. What is happening with MDI in other parts of the world, and how can Air Future work or compete with those parties? So we might just answer those.
Yeah, absolutely. From an overall business perspective, I don't look at it as a product thing. I look at it as a region thing. So we have multifaceted opportunity from the point of view of servicing markets that are dependable on climate change. And these include energy, decentralized energy centralized energy, transport, clean engines, etc., so forth. So I don't look at those as product by product by product by product. I look at them as region by region by region by region. Why? Because every region needs every one of those services. Now, the moment you can demonstrate a significant region who are benefiting from a collection of your services, then you can pick it up and replicate it around the world with some adaptation. So in other words, if I'm doing something in northern Queensland, which is warm, and I want to replicate it to Siberia in Africa, I'm going to have to do some adaptation, but not as much as batteries. But that's a bit of an extreme example. So you've got cultural differences, you've got this and that and so forth. But what we want to do is we want to create a showcase and we want to replicate it globally. Now, the issue with MDI is that they're only technology. Now, they're not going to be able to replicate the technology globally without having a monetized commercialization region that can demonstrate it. Because people want to see the proof of application at a customer base, and they want to see customers buying it, and they want to see profitability, et cetera, so forth. Now, the moment you can do that at sufficient scale, then you can turn around to the rest of the world and say, hey, we can do it, blah, 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 blah. Now, nobody is doing that with MDI at the moment. And the only real working relationship that MDI has got is in Sardinia in Italy, where they're working specifically on product. Now, let me tell you one other thing. MDI went through a difficult stage with COVID. And not only did France get hit extremely hard, Nice got hit extremely hard, MDI got hit extremely hard, but more importantly, the World Expo got hit extremely hard. Now, MDI and the World Expo had already worked out all their relationship and so forth, and suddenly World Expo turned around and said, we're delaying for a whole 12 months. Now, those things affected MDI, and MDI finished up, what's the word, I guess, consolidating, winding back a bit, etc., so forth. Now, as they wound back to some extent, this increased an opportunity for us to move in to some extent, right? So the gap that was left within MDI because of the stresses of COVID, et cetera, so forth, and Expo, which incidentally they still delivered on, is able to be picked up by us, which increases our strength and our influence and so forth. What else do we need to be able to do that, capitalize on it? Money. So when we go and talk to these potential cornerstone investors and so forth, we will be talking about the relationship with MDI. We will be talking about the IP, and we will be technology, and we will be talking about Cyril Nager and his capabilities and his server, et cetera, so forth. So that's very much part of our current exercise, and we simply name that part of the transition. Russell?
Next question, would you anticipate an IPO on the NYSE or NASDAQ?
We probably won't have a say in that, because by the time we IPO, we will be in relationship and collaboration with parties that are far bigger and far smarter and far more experienced than us. But I can tell you one thing. There's a lot of misunderstanding about IPOs, right? Firstly, to have a successful IPO, you've got to promote it properly. Secondly, you've got to be careful how you set your price and so forth, because the last thing you want to do is to screw every last ounce of blood out for them. So the moment that it's listed, the price crashes and has no underlying sustainability platform, which creates a real problem for your liquidity. So IPOing is a very, very professional business. It's really best looked at around the time that you want to IPO, and the investors that we have and the investors. Now, here's another point. When you IPO, one of the investors that's going to help you underwrite that IPO are going to be the big ticket players. They're going to tell you where they want you to go. So if you had somebody like Breakthrough Energy with Bill Gates and all the billionaires say, you know, we want to get, you know, on board with this, blah, 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 they'll tell you where they want you to go. It won't be the decision of Russell or me in isolation, I can assure you of that. Far smarter people than me, and I can't say smarter than Russell, but I'd be certainly smarter than me.
I'll go with that, John. How does the cost of, say, 7 kilowatt air storage unit compare to the same in the battery technology? In your modelling, since you don't have an actual real world product?
Well, we answered that question earlier on, saying we're waiting for pricing of local manufacturing of product, which we then need to extrapolate for volume. So we haven't yet set a price on that. And we would probably also seek some consultation. It depends on what sort of subsidies we're eligible for. It depends on who's asking. If somebody's asking that question and they're going to buy 1,000 off you, it's a little bit different if somebody's looking at buying one. So we don't have the answer to that question at the moment, but rest assured, we tend to speak to people that we will be less costly for the simple reason that our process is so much less costly. We don't have mining, we don't have global distribution, we have half an engine which we can just purchase from somebody across the road. We're manufacturing the thing locally, we're assembling it locally, blah, 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 et cetera, and so forth. Yeah, it's just a lower cost process, you know.
Very much so. Have you approached angel investment organisations, e.g. Icehouse Ventures, for capital and reasons for the decision?
No, and we would certainly like not to. You know, the issue with Icehouse Ventures and all these other firms that we know well and that are on the right-hand side of that chart that I showed you is that they basically don't do us. You know, if you look at venture capital, generally speaking, right, especially with the technology and the software and the digital and the design of apps and all the rest of it, or so forth, etc., it's relatively straightforward. The complication with us is both historic and future. Historic, we've spent 20 years developing technology. How are you going to value that and who's going to pay for it? Now, if you then talk about the future, based on our prediction, we've got a global market. How are you going to discount the value of that global market into a current price? Now, if you look at venture capital, I have all these other firms, right? They have a very definitive sort of structure. They look at pre-seed, then they look at seed, then they look at Series A, then they look at Series B, then they look at Series C, et cetera, and so forth. And all of those have typical valuations. And all of those have typical timeframes. If I fund you for Series A, then I don't expect you to come back for Series B for 12 months, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. We're not into any of that, right? And the other thing is that VCs, et cetera, predominantly invest for return on investment. And that can make it expensive. Whereas we're looking at firms who are looking at investment because they desperately need a solution to global problems, such as the governments, such as the climate organizations, such as funds like ARENA and CEFC and Southern Cross Venture Partners and Bill Gates's Breakthrough Energy Ventures. These firms are desperate for organizations such as ours. And the other thing is, how much money do they invest? If you go to an Icehouse and ask them for $1 million, it's very different than if you go to an ARENA and ask them for $1 million, because they can just flick it to you. Whereas Icehouse got to do a lot of analysis and this and that and blah, 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 et cetera, so forth. Now, having said that, there are some firms like Mavac, for argument's sake, that have angel investors that have just, you know, raised some capital and blah, blah, blah. Certainly, we will talk to them. But we will only talk to them on the basis of what it is that we want and our limitation, not it is what they want and their limitation. Now, you might well say, well, yeah, well, hang on, John, you're trying to raise money and, you need some working capital fairly desperate and all this sort of stuff, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's all true. But we've also got you as a responsibility. We don't want to go making decisions and doing things now because of a short-term need that's going to come back and bite us on the tail end because of the valuation that we had to sacrifice. So we are all shareholders here and we're all sacrificing significantly. So when we make decisions, we make them very much with your mentality. So, and that's something we'll be able to give you more details on over the course of the next number of weeks as we pursue this investment scenario in more depth. Russell?
Okay, next two we'll take together. What do you need in terms of funding from today to get product to market? And then when are we actually see commercially viable product? Well, certainly what we're doing in Christchurch in regard to the compressed air energy storage will be, once we put that in the field and work with the parties who have a need for compressed air, that product is going to be replicable. So there is some immediacy about commercially viable product, and certainly we've seen already viable commercially available product with MDI, with their bespoke product that they built for Veolia and also for Expo. So again, with the Christchurch manufacturing, that will give us a far better head of what we might need for terms of funding from today to get our product to the market. And that's where working capital over the next 2 months is really important for us to actually start to quantify the actual amounts. I'm anticipating that we're expecting that one-offs are going to be a lot more expensive. But once we start to be coming and making 5s, 10s, 10s and 20s and 50s, because part of that engine is already pre-manufactured by coming from other approved engines, then the actual component addition on top of that is actually not major. So we may find there are some rather pleasant surprises in our manufacturing advantage. So that's a answer in progress. John?
Yeah, I think, Russell has addressed the working capital, the question related to the product, getting the product to market. So the working capital is something we need to do to keep the platform rolling from the point of view of being able to progress all of this stuff, right? To get the product to the market, you've got to have a product, you've got to have a market, and you've got to have a certain degree of volume. The thing is that without knowing who is in the audience at the moment, I would be so bold as to say that relative to the parties that are out there from a funding point of view, we're all small fish, right? There are parties in the government area and the climate area and other areas and so forth, investing billions of dollars. And so if they see something they want to bring to market, they'll bring it to market. The other thing is that we don't always have to pay for things to be brought to market. We can also collaborate with the parties. For example, the irrigation industry has already said to us that they want to collaborate and do this and do that and so forth, etc. So there is in kind money and participation. But logically speaking, if you say, yeah, ignore all that for a minute, just answer the question. I would say, well, you bring green air to the market and you bring an energy to the market as a storage unit, etc. And we will know more when that costs when we get the quote from Shamrock. So right now we cannot say exactly If we call those each a project, we call one a transport project, we call the other one an energy project. We haven't costed them yet from the point of view of bringing them to market. And that's the very next exercise. That's different to the working capital. The working capital is what you need from day to day for us to be able to have the platform to develop the funders and the demos and the collaborative parties, et cetera, so forth. So they're slightly different perspective, Russell.
Right. Can we see copies of this webinar? Can we send copies of this webinar to non-shareholders who would be interested in this stage? Yes, that will be fine, I would expect. Thank you, Chris. And Terry, thanks. Looking forward to that. This session has been very useful. Well done. Thanks very much. We hope so, and that was our intention, to help inform shareholders. How many dollars is required to commercialise a product in Australia, and what is the time frame for the product to be available in Australia? What do you say to that, John?
Well, bear in mind that you know, people are using the expression product. Depends entirely what you mean by product. When we produce an engine, for argument's sake, we've got a product. Will people in the future be buying that as a product? I suspect yes. On day one, I suspect no, because it'll need to be part of an application. As mentioned earlier, unless somebody, a major funder, snaps their fingers and says, I want to do this, I want to do that, blah, blah, blah. Logically speaking, the two products that we would look at would be the Green Air, which we would probably do in conjunction with MDI and a company in Italy called Air Mobility, or the design of the engine with regards to storage unit. Now, the interesting thing about the storage unit, right, is that the tanks you can buy off market, on market. The tanks you can buy, they're available. The piping you can buy, it's available. The software is available. So basically, once you're making the engines, you're combining the engines with the tank, sticking it all in a box. You've got the piping, et cetera, so forth. So it doesn't take a long time, but you do need to price it. And that's something that we're not willing to take a step on till we actually get the information from Shamrock, you know, so forth, you know. If you're going to do the transitioning, you've got to do the transitioning. And that's part of the transitioning. So it is a step process, you know. So we can't answer. Now, from a time frame point of view, we'll have a better handle on that hopefully next week when Cyril gets back from his holidays, and we can talk about, you know, what are the next steps with regards to Green Air, what are the next steps with regards to getting the quotes, and also as we start to talk to funders. So in summary, we're a little bit in a case at the moment where we're doing all of this sort of stuff, and the questions are not, and we're not quite ready to give the detail on the questions, but we do hope to be over the course of the next weeks or next month or something like that. So we're homing in on it.
And I think the next question expands on that actual current situation, because why will John not answer the simple question on price of an energy storage unit? Tell us the expected price of a 13.5 kilowatt hour storage unit, if that is your preferred metric. Don't complicate, no, don't conflate with modularity and revs. At the end of the day, storage is storage. Well, if we go back quite a few years, when we were doing initial costings on an MDI air wall, based on the knowledge that we had with an MDI engine and tanks, the initial outlay for the air wall and what we had on a fixed volume of 7 kilowatt storage at that time, we were extremely competitive. Where we start to pick a considerable advantage up on that earlier model was that if you wanted then to have 14 kilowatts, you had to outlay $8,000 for another battery, but you only needed to have more tanks, which are marginally a lot cheaper than a battery. So as you required more storage, the incremental overall marginal cost reduces significantly. So and again, coming back to our work in Christchurch, we will be able to fine tune and be more concrete on prices, but we can't get away that what John is pointing out is that the system is modular and we don't have to rely on, well, if you want more kilowatts, you've got to spend another $8,000 buying another battery. We just have to, we can say, well, this is, we can have compare horses with courses. And then if we're wanting differences either side for kilowatts or more kilowatt hours, then that's where we fit in and have our advantage. John.
Yeah, I think also the comment, I don't see the comment as completely rational because of the fact that what you're saying is that if I give you these specific parameters, you tell me what the product price is going to be, but I'm saying to you, we don't have the product. And we haven't yet manufactured the engine within Australia. And we haven't yet manufactured the engine for market sale or volume sale or anything. So what you're effectively saying to me is saying, hey, you've never done any price analysis, you haven't done the manufacturing yet, you haven't matched it to the field, you haven't matched it to the Tesla Airborne, but give me a price anyway. That doesn't make any sense, you know? So what we're thinking, I'm not sidestepping giving you a price, I'm saying I don't have it. So if I give you a price, I'll be making it up. Now, I can make you up a price if you want me to make you up a price, but there's not going to be any use to you because you're going to be going off saying, hey, this is the price. And it might not be right. It might be cheaper. Or it might be more expensive. But one more point I would make, and I apologize for that because I'd love to give you a price right now. I'd love to give everybody a price right now. Now, the first thing that's going to happen is when I walk into an investor, he's going to say to me, so what's the price of your unit? How does it compare? He's going to ask me exactly the same question as you just asked me. And I'm going to have to give him exactly the same answer. And but hopefully not in a few weeks' time, I'm able to give him a better answer. But the last comment I would make on it, if you say, you've asked me for a price for a 7 kilowatt, 13.5 kilowatt hour for argument's sake, but that's not necessarily going to be the great majority of our product sale, in which case that is relevant. What do I mean by that? Say for argument's sake, I sold 10 million 20 kilowatts and I sold 1.7 kilowatt. Then that 1.7 kilowatt is going to be priced differently from a volume perspective than the 20 kilowatt is. Now, we're in this business to create sales, but we're also in this business to create profitability for you as a shareholder. So it's not constructive to give away throwaway answers, in my opinion. It's much better to say, can we have this discussion again with you in a few weeks' time when we'll have a more concrete answer that we can then take to the public as well. Russell?
Thanks, John. Have you retained the option to work with other engine providers? I'm not sure there. We're looking at manufacturing and being in control of our own manufacturing. And certainly there will be a variety of parties who can do the manufacturing, which to an extent is really carried out, a lot of it is carried out on a lathe making the particular components, a lot of them around aluminium. So yes, we do have an option to work, and the Shamrock is the lower end up to maybe 100 units. So when we're looking at over that, we will be looking for other manufacturers who can take on the larger numbers.
I'm not sure of the question, Russell. Does the question mean are there engines that can provide componentry to our air engine?
Oh, that may be right.
Other engines and air engines altogether?
Well, at the moment, if it's the engine, MDI are the are the parties who have selected the engines which are appropriate for their pneumatic valve control to go on the top off.
Yeah, but is the shareholder asking questions relating to non-air engines altogether, a completely different type of engine, and you know that's not a compressed air engine, or is he asking around compressed air engine?
Well,
because I mean, if he's asking about our engine, then the answer is yeah, we'll work with other parties to get some of their engine componentry to build our engine. If he's asking about other compressed air engines, we don't know of any that do what it is that we are looking to do. You know, and I would say, oh yeah, no, my brother does compressed air engines, but yeah, sure. But what we are looking to do, right, is a lot more technological than that. If he's asking for non-compressed air engines, then we will always keep an eye out. You know, there's a firm over in the US, for example, that does stuff for HVAC. That stands for heating, ventilation, air conditioning, etc. And they're getting a bit of traction or so forth. You know, if there was a cross-market fertilization, we could certainly talk to them. You know, anything is possible, but our focus is really on the current technology that we're promoting. That'll keep us off the street for some considerable time to come.
Thank you, John. How many shareholders are there and how many shares are on issue? The company Air Future 2024 Limited has 3,480 shareholders, thereabouts, I think, and it's got 500 million shares on issue, or thereabouts again. I haven't got the specific numbers. So will other licenses be stepped ahead by the work being done here? Well, will other licensees be stepped ahead by the work being done here? Is there any benefit back to us?
Well, I can just make a couple of comments. The license model hasn't really worked for MDI. And the reason it hasn't worked for MDI, in my opinion, in our opinion, is that it's been about the technology rather than about the commercialization. Nobody's done the commercialization. You know, nobody's done the transition to the field. So, you know, there's a saying in the investment banking industry called the death zone. And the death zone is where technology just sits on its backside and it doesn't do the work needed to commercialize, which is exactly what we're doing right now, which adds all the value. I don't believe that the license model is going to go ahead. What I do believe is that we will be the sole and only and leading party to be able to demonstrate a showcase of regional participation in our products and therefore be able to replicate it globally. Because if you're going to do global licensing and so forth, etc., who's going to do it? Now, you might well say, well, MDI will do it, etc., but they haven't. And they have tried with the global license, and we have licenses, but you know, we're potentially looking at moving away to a much broader, much better environment for us and our shareholders in our relationship with MDI. What am I saying? I'm basically saying that I believe that MDI needs Air Future to be able to move ahead, or somebody like Air Future, but there's nobody else like Air Future at the moment. So the license, so I don't see us giving benefits to other parties without them actually becoming a collaborative relationship with us, rather than trying to grab our IP, commercial IP, as opposed to technical IP. Russell?
Is the original, we're drawing to an end here, so maybe take 2 or 3 more. Is the original Indranet shareholder number the same for our shares now as them? The answer is yes. All shareholders went from Air Future Limited, which was previously Indranet Technologies Limited, and hold shares in Air Future 2024 Limited Founders Trust, and there are other shareholders who had assisted the company from 2016 who are also shareholders by virtue of funding at critical times, who became shareholders in what we call the it's another trust, Supporters Trust. So we do try to respect certainly the parties who have reinvested over the more recent years. Maybe you could answer, I have to get my glasses clean, answer the remaining questions later by email to shareholders. That's a good idea. And I think we'll move on from that one. Shane Jones, Regional Development Minister with funds to invest, may be worth following up, correct? So what we'll do is I'll just run through to the end and then we'll stop. There's 2 to go. Is there anything of which we can actively look at the moment? No, but there will be. But if you travelled to Europe, yes, there would be. Does MDI have a cost price? Well, we can come back to that.
Sorry, what was that question?
Does MDI have a cost price?
What's that mean?
Well, I'm not too sure, but certainly what we are looking at the moment is we've received some indication of cost for supply from the Sardinian parties in relation to building the golf cart lake for them and then their delivery. So we're having a look at those costs at the moment. So thank you everyone for your interest, and I'm glad that from some of the supportive comments that you have been, shareholders are getting a lot more information and feel you are being informed. So thank you for this opportunity. And thank you for your continued support over the past 2 decades. And in this period, we've made credible strides. And of note, we've substantially widened our energy and transport market opportunities. We've developed local, that's Australian, New Zealand and Pacific Island business relationships. We've created public awareness of the technology through attending and presenting at conferences and government submissions, and so it goes on. And in parallel, the MDI technology capabilities, applications and performances and credibility has grown, and we're enthusiastic about developing the opportunities ahead. And your investment has been instrumental in getting us to this point. And we're now at a crucial juncture with further support while we progress the larger financial sums for project funding, market development and so on will be key to scaling our efforts and maximising our potential. Working capital will ensure that we can fully realise our market entry and drive the next phase of growth. If you are willing and interested in continuing your support, please contact me and John. It's Russell at AirFuture or John at AirFuture, both.co.nz.